Oh, gosh. I'm looking at what I want to say and what is probably the most imperative thing. I'm going to go into this. You will note, as I have noted, in disaster zones, they're telling you to know your zone, know what zone you're in on an evacuation map. So I was recently attending a meeting that was a meeting for ranchers and farmers about fire resiliency. And I saw this huge map of Sonoma County laid out on a table with all of the zones. And I looked at the map, and it was hard to read, even the size that it was. It was hard to identify the specific zones. So I left that meeting after taking many notes, of which I will be developing into an enhanced story. But I'm going to tell you about this part of the story. And again, you can type in Know Your Zone evacuation maps in your search. I've been typing in. I'm noticing that these maps are nationwide. And I started to then look in to who's behind these maps. So I'm going to go over this now. This is just new information, so I haven't heard it from anyone else, and you are hearing it right now. So I found that there's a global mapping evacuation corporation called Know Your Zone after an attack of weather. So these are weather attacks, and they're coming up with these evacuation zones, and they're presumably helping you with evacuation after they've attacked you. And why do I say they? Because these maps were orchestrated by the military and by digital corporations. I will go over that. They are providing maps in your cities, and in our cities, in most cities. These are war maps. Why do I say war maps? Well, think about what we know is the inevitable here in this country. William Cooper in Behold a Pale Horse spoke about it. Certainly the YouTube video report from Iron Mountain showed door-to-door extraction of people. We know that that has been the intent all along, is to go door-to-door. So now what I want you to think about is when you see a police raid in a house, they go in and they go through the rooms and they say clear. They go into the next room, clear. Well, these are these war maps. These are small zones. The zones are intensified by their tighter zones, smaller zones in the population zones, in the areas of higher population. As I look on my map on the zones that abut the Pacific Ocean, those zones are huge. This map is color-coded. And the zones where the cities are, Santa Rosa, San Francisco, the zones are very small.
In the event of a large-scale emergency requiring a mass evacuation, the City of Santa Rosa will announce evacuation warnings and orders using pre-planned evacuation zones. Find your evacuation zone with your address using the city's Evacuation Zone Lookup tool. Please note, this tool is only for addresses within the Santa Rosa city limits. And most likely, smaller scale emergencies mean the city would not evacuate an entire zone, but instead will require the evacuation of a part of the zone or zones. Either way, it is important to know your evacuation zone. To determine your zone, go to srcity.org/evaczones and click on the Find Your Evacuation Zone by Address button. A new window will open with a map of evacuation zones in Santa Rosa. Now, enter your address in the search field at the top of your screen for mobile or top left of your screen on a desktop computer. Select your correct address from the drop-down. Now you will see your zone designation listed under your address and see it highlighted on the map. In this example, the zone name is Central. Finally, write down your evacuation zone name and keep it somewhere you will remember it for referring to later. If an emergency requires an evacuation for your zone, public safety officials will use your zone name when they issue evacuations using our public alerts and warnings systems. Keep in mind, the zones, or a portion of a zone, when announced during an emergency, will include descriptive locations to assist in their identification. An emergency can happen at any time, and it is important to be ready. Knowing your designated evacuation zone in advance is one step you can take to be better prepared now in the event of a large-scale emergency.
So, what they want us to do now is put evacuation tags out on our mailboxes or gates so that when we're told to evacuate, they won't have to knock on the door. They will know that you've left your property. Well, what we know happened here in 2017 in the Tubbs fire that burned about 5,000 homes in a couple of days, jumped the freeway. It was horrific, and I have many family members that lost homes and friends. But what we know is that the Sheriff's Department said and told us they were dealing with truckloads of looters that were being bussed in. Now remember, this was a planned weaponized fire attack by the use of many types of weapons, boots on the ground, drones, certainly directed energy weapons, etc. And then they send in the looters. There's a book called Point Patrol that was written soon after that 2017 fire, where this cul-de-sac of homes, they stayed, they would not leave, and they were having to fend off the looters with rakes and shovels. And their main objective was to string out hoses and keep the embers from burning down their community, their little cul-de-sac area. And they witnessed the looters as well. So they want us to evacuate. They want to know when your homes are empty, and then they're going to require permits to re-enter our properties. And I was stunned to hear that. It sounds reasonable when you think about it without realizing that this is a war map and we are an occupied corporation being run by military operations set to kill us. So if you don't look at reality as reality is, you will look at this as being, oh, it's a good idea, reentry permits. Well, if you are permitted, the only way you can get permitted for early reentry after an area has been considered an evacuation zone is if you are a supplier or if you are in commerce, if you're selling animal products or food or dairy or eggs, this kind of thing in the rural areas here in Northern California. You have to show you are permitted and you are paying fees as being a seller of some sort. Otherwise, you're not able to have an early reentry permit. All other people, residents, etc., will not allow to reenter until the evacuation order has been dropped. In prior situations, that can be up to 2 weeks. Now, with the type of heat-driven intentional fires that are being set all over, it could be much longer before we're allowed back into our homes. And I can say to you that the evacuation centers are a concern because the requirements of the health emergency and the health orders could also require that you're not able to have a reentry ability unless you've met all of your local health requirements, and you know what I mean by that. So as I was looking at who's mapping, and I looked at your zone, I found out that Genesis is one of the mapping companies. It actually was renamed because it obviously didn't want to be associated with whom they are really with. But they get funds from the U.S. Army, and they receive certifications from the emergency management software companies and the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. They are hooked in to government and wireless intel and wars. I discovered after reading some of their management members, their board members, the backgrounds, that many were attached with the LRAD Corporation, which is Integrated Defense Systems, and certainly the use of remote weapons systems as well. And many of them worked previously for Raytheon against defense contractors, military contractors. This is wargaming. They have set this country up now in zones. So I will go further into what Genesis Inc. is, because they acquired the emergency evacuation provider, which was called Zone Haven, Z-O-N-E, Haven, H-A-V-E-N. They acquired Zone Haven. And they talk about how it's a transformative evacuation planning program and emergency management system. This is a war system. These are war maps. You need and must look at this. We are under siege. Your local elected, presumably elected officials know, and you are being led into being captured and relocated, and I will get into that in a moment as well. We figured out what they are doing with planned relocations of all of us that survive, that aren't killed in the interim. So let's go in to this Genesis. This is an article out of San Diego, California, June 9th of 2021. And it's a global leader in critical communication systems and solutions. And they announced that they had acquired Zone Haven, a fast-growing provider of software as a service solutions for emergency evacuations. Now, I must again reiterate, the emergency evacuations are weather-related targeting events to harm, injure, kill, and wipe out our communities. Now they're offering assistance in helping us to safely evacuate the very war-torn areas that they are attacking. So they go on to say that they provide planning and training and resources for first responders and health agencies and communities to manage the evacuations. So based in San Francisco, California, Zone Haven's services were trusted by more than 170 fire districts. Now, these guys don't know. This is a military operation. You can tell them this is a military operation because it is. They say, quote, with increasing wildfire, flooding, severe weather, active shooters, hazmat, and other crisis events require proven solutions to help quickly move people away from danger. And again, I remind you, the danger they create. The Chief Executive Office of Genesis Inc., G-E-N-A-S-Y-S Inc., we have recently seen in California and other areas of the world that critical events require preparation. Of course they do. They are causing this. Now, they say that they service more than 100 countries in a range of diverse applications, not only including emergency warning systems and mass communications. But let's go on into this. Genesis Inc. Was a long-range acoustic device. That's what the LRAD is, LRAD, long-range acoustic device. This is what Genesis is involved in, headquartered in San Diego, California. They have developed long-range acoustic hailing systems. The company has many employees, and they've reported huge amounts of revenue in 2019. Their flagship product is the Sonic Weapon long-range acoustic device, the LRAD. It has been used by the Israeli military against the Palestinian civilians in the occupied Palestinian territory, commonly known in the Israel military as the Scream. targets with an extremely high volume and focused sound, as it has been used in multiple times by the Israeli military in the occupied West Bank to attack Palestinian protesters, according to WHO Prophets. In 2011, the Israeli Ministry of Defense ordered 293,000 worth of LRAD systems. Different models of the LRAD system have also been used by the U.S. military, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, the Migration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, Customs and Border Protection. Additionally, multiple police departments across the U.S. use LRADs as a crowd control weapon against protesters, as first documented in Pittsburgh during the 2009 G20 summit. LRADs were later deployed by U.S. police departments, for example, in the New York and Oakland during the Occupy movement, in Standing Rock during the 2016 Dakota Access Pipeline protests, in Washington, D.C. during the 2017 Women's March, and in Black Lives Matter protests in New York, Ferguson, and Portland, following the police killings of Eric Garner, Michael Brown, George Floyd, respectively. So I want to talk about the history, because this is a corporation of death. They're using weapons on us. We are the enemy. So understand, these are war maps that have been developed by the military to conduct wargaming, killing strategies on all of us.
This is a test of the long-range acoustic device LRAD.
One acoustic device is gaining ground daily by being law enforcement's go-to choice for crowd control scenarios and search and rescue missions. That device is LRAD. I'm Terry Shepard, and this is Digital Justice. Robert, first question. What does LRAD stand for?
Long-range acoustic device.
Robert Putnam with LRAD Corporation gives the lowdown on this piece of popular yet contentious technology.
With the long-range acoustic device systems, we're able to project voice messages and alarm tones up to distances over to 2 miles. It stays focused in a 30 to 60 degree beam, and by allowing us to do that, the people at the other end absolutely understand the instructions that are being given them, and we can give them the instructions in any language. We have a highly intelligible, very robust product now that's being sold throughout the world to militaries, commercial security, maritime security, and then also for wildlife protection and control. And for law enforcement, they appreciate having a device that really works for communication. Bullhorns just don't cut it. In large outdoor situations especially.
So how did this technology come about?
The genesis of LRAD really begins with the attack on the USS Cole in October of 2000. Here was a USS destroyer in a Yemeni port. They didn't know if it were fishermen or terrorists that were pulling alongside them until it was too late. They turned out to be terrorists, detonated, killed...
And we know what happened.
Yeah, it was bad. Killed many sailors, injured others, caused $1 billion of damage to the boat. And they had all this firepower on board, but they didn't know who these people were, so they couldn't take any action. Well, the whole point with LRAD is it fills a critical gap. How do we determine if they're friendlies or not, if they're not responding to radio calls?
When I got in front of the device, I could immediately hear its effectiveness.
This is a test of the long-range acoustic device LRAD. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
All right, guys, I have to say I'm a little worried walking up here like you're gonna sneak in and turn it back on. Scott, you were the operator on that one.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Right off the bat, first impression, I felt like there was a dude standing right here yelling in my ear, but it was really clear.
Here you have the back of the head unit where all the electronics are housed. You got the power switch you turn on. Power is activated by the control unit, which you have the on-off position.
Right.
This is a standard MP3 player, so you can put whatever test files or any kind of audio media on this MP3 player.
You will be given food, water, and medical attention.
Because it can broadcast effectively up to 2 miles away and very powerfully, you can mount it on helicopters, fly over and be able to broadcast messages to hopefully the people that you're trying to find. Cover a lot of area quickly rather than putting, in some cases, hundreds of people on the ground in the bushes trying to find people. And then for suicide situations from bridges or buildings, fire departments and high-rise situations.
It can also be used more in a bit of an offensive or a defensive manner. How does that work for that?
Well, I think you're referring to our alarm tone capability of this. So that's what's gotten most of the interest from people out there on the other side. We really don't look at this as any kind of a weapon, non-lethal or otherwise.
And though reluctant to speak on camera, law enforcement officials stand behind LRAD.
The alarm tone is mostly used, especially in law enforcement applications, especially when protests get out of control or you get large crowds. And with LRAD, that fills that critical gap between bullhorns and rubber bullets.
But many groups, including the ACLU, have issues with LRAD.
I think LRAD has no place at public events and forums, especially ones that any free speech expression activity is too intimidating, it's too scary, and so chills speech that we want to encourage in a democracy.
Are these machines causing any harmful side effects to the eardrums and the senses? Some would say it is possible that they are. So that would be considered torture.
My wife had one used on her in Oakland. It was like a kind of psychological torture. Like it's in your brain and you can't think, you can't move.
I'd rather be tased, shot with a rubber bullet, maced, and then kicked in the balls than have my eardrums erupted.
Like anything else, if it's too loud, like a fire siren or a police siren, you put your hands over your ears.
Right.
By doing that, it cuts 25 dB of sound pressure level instantly. You can still hear it, you can still understand it, but it's not going to hurt your hearing.
Right.
It's just a different thing to have this, magical voice being beamed at you or even bringing you down. Traditional public order policing has its value.
Well, I think you have some people out there, especially during protest situations, who view this as, hey, this is not allowing us to protest or do what we want. We know of one case in regards to the Pittsburgh G20 summit where LRAD was deployed.
By order of the City of Pittsburgh Chief Police, I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly.
And I think that was the first time that a police department had used LRAD in a high-profile event. And what they were interested in is keeping the property damage down and the number of arrests down. That's the bottom line of LRAD. It's the ability to use long-range, powerful, highly intelligible communication to resolve uncertain situations peacefully, to determine intent, and potentially save lives on both sides of the long-range acoustic device.
Guys, that was actually a great demo.
Thank you.
And maybe could I borrow this for a party? Come on. There you have it. In the eyes of law enforcement, LRAD is an effective tool that's use will certainly continue to spread. But in the eyes of others, it's a potential weapon just waiting to be abused. No matter the opinion, it looks like LRAD is here to stay. I'm Terry Shepard, and this has been Digital Justice.